What's up, guys? Welcome back to Horror Stories. In today's video, you'll hear some truly terrifying real-life encounters. Stories that real people have actually experienced and lived to tell. So make sure you stick around till the end, because every single story here is absolutely worth listening to. Before we begin, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps the channel grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. My name is David Chen, and I'm a real estate developer from Portland, Oregon. What happened to me last September still keeps me up at night, and I need to tell someone about it, even if nobody believes me. I was overseeing the clearing of a 40-acre plot in the Cascade foothills, about 2 hours east of the city. Beautiful land, old-growth forest, mostly Douglas fir and western red cedar, the kind of trees that had been standing there for maybe 200 years. We'd gotten all the permits, jumped through all the environmental hoops. Everything was legal. We were going to build a luxury housing development called Cascade Vista Estates. The logging crew started work on a Monday morning. I remember standing there with my coffee, watching the first tree come down. It was massive, probably 150 feet tall, trunk as wide as a car. When it fell, the sound echoed through the whole valley. I felt it in my chest. By Wednesday, we'd cleared about 5 acres. That's when things started feeling off. The foreman, a guy named Rick who'd been doing this for 30 years, came to me around noon. "Mr. Chen, the guys are spooked," he said. "They keep hearing things in the trees, sounds like, I don't know. Screaming maybe, but not human." I told him it was probably just animals relocating, stressed by the noise. Elk, maybe coyotes. He didn't look convinced, but he went back to work. That night, I stayed late in my trailer on site, going over the next day's plans. Around 11 p.m., I heard it myself. It started as a low sound, almost like wind, but there wasn't any wind. Then it rose in pitch, this awful wailing that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The trees around my trailer creaked and swayed, even though the air was perfectly still. I stepped outside with my flashlight. The cleared area looked wrong in the darkness. The stumps, dozens of them, seemed to be weeping. I walked closer and touched one. Sap, thick and dark, was oozing out, way more than should be possible, and it was warm. "Just the wood settling," I said out loud, trying to convince myself. Thursday morning, 2 of the crew didn't show up. "No calls, no explanations," Rick said. "They'd probably just quit." But I could see the worry in his eyes. The remaining crew worked slowly, nervously. One of the chainsaw operators, a young guy named Tommy, kept stopping and looking over his shoulder. "You okay?" I asked him during a break. "The trees are watching us," he said quietly. I know how that sounds, but I swear to God, they're watching. I should have shut it down then. I should have listened to that instinct screaming at me to leave. But we had investors, deadlines, contracts. So I told Tommy to take the rest of the day off and get some sleep. Friday was when it all fell apart. We started work at dawn. I was standing near the tree line, marking the next section to be cleared, when I noticed something strange. The trees at the edge of the clearing had moved. I know that sounds insane, but I'd been staring at this forest for days, and I knew the layout. A cluster of young cedars that had been about 20 feet back from the clearing edge was now right at the boundary. Their roots were exposed, lifted partially out of the ground, like they'd dragged themselves forward during the night. "Rick," I called out, "come look at this." Before he could respond, we heard Tommy scream. He was near the center of the cleared area, surrounded by stumps. His chainsaw was on the ground, still running. He was trying to run toward us, but he couldn't move. His boots were stuck in something. As we got closer, I saw it. Roots. Thin roots had burst up through the soil and wrapped around his ankles, and they were pulling him down. "Help me!" Tommy was crying, yanking at his legs. "Help me, please!" Rick and I grabbed him under the arms and pulled. The roots tightened, and I heard Tommy's ankles crack. He screamed again. More roots erupted from the ground, wrapping around his calves, his thighs. They were pulling him down into the earth itself. The other crew members ran over with axes and started hacking at the roots. Black sap sprayed everywhere. The roots writhed like living things, like snakes. For every one we cut, 2 more burst from the ground. Tommy was waist deep now, still screaming, his fingers clawing at the dirt. "Pull him out!" I was yelling, my hands slipping on his shirt, his skin. Pull him out! But we couldn't. The earth swallowed him. His screams became muffled, then stopped. In less than 2 minutes, Tommy was gone. Just gone. The ground where he'd been standing smoothed over like water, leaving only his hard hat. We ran. All of us. We ran to our vehicles and drove away, and I've never driven faster in my life. Behind us, I could hear it. That wailing sound, but louder now, triumphant almost. And the trees. In my rearview mirror, I swear I saw them, moving, spreading back into the cleared area, reclaiming what we'd taken. The police searched for 3 days. They found nothing. No body, no disturbance in the soil. They ruled it a missing person case. The lumber company's insurance investigators concluded that Tommy had probably run off, maybe had a breakdown. The project was abandoned. The investors pulled out. I went back once, alone, about a month later. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see it for myself, to confirm I wasn't crazy. The clearing was gone. Completely gone. Young trees, already 20 feet tall, covered every inch of the 5 acres we'd spent days clearing. Saplings that should have taken years to grow. The stumps were nowhere to be seen, swallowed by the forest floor. And in the center, where Tommy had been taken, there was a tree I'd never seen before. A massive cedar, easily 200 years old, that couldn't possibly have grown there in a month. I walked up to it, my heart hammering, and put my hand on the bark. It was warm, and deep inside the trunk I heard it. A sound like breathing. And then very faintly, a voice. Tommy's voice. It hurts. It whispered from inside the tree. Please. It hurts so much. I ran. I haven't been back. I sold my company, moved to Seattle, and now I work in an office building where I can't see trees from any window. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that wailing sound. And I know, that the forest remembers what we tried to do. The permits for Cascade Vista Estates are still on file. Sometimes I get calls from developers asking about the land, saying they heard it's available. I tell them all the same thing. Don't go there. Don't clear those trees. Don't make the same mistake I did. Some of them laugh. Some of them hang up. I wonder how long before I hear about them on the news. I'm Amanda Reeves, and I used to be a beekeeper in Savannah, Georgia. Notice I said used to be. I'll never keep bees again. I'll never even go near honey. What I'm about to tell you is the God's honest truth, and I still have the scars to prove it. It started in April of last year. I had about 30 hives on my property, a small farm about 15 miles outside the city. I'd been keeping bees for almost 10 years. It was peaceful work, meditative almost. I loved the sound of them, the way they moved together like a single organism. My honey won awards at the county fair 3 years running. That spring, a biotech company called Verdant Solutions bought the property next to mine. They were developing some kind of pesticide, they said. Something revolutionary that would only target invasive species and leave native insects alone. They assured everyone in the area it was completely safe. They even had EPA approval. The facility went up fast, a sprawling complex of laboratories and greenhouses. By mid-April, they were operational. That's when my bees started acting strange. At first, it was subtle. They seemed more aggressive, buzzing louder than usual. When I opened the hives for inspection, they'd swarm around me more frantically, even though I was wearing my suit. But they were still producing honey, still following their usual patterns. So I didn't worry too much. Then the honey started changing. In late May, I extracted a batch and noticed it was darker than normal, almost amber with a slightly metallic smell. I tasted a tiny bit, just a drop, and immediately spit it out. It was bitter, chemical tasting. Wrong. I called the county agriculture extension office, and they sent someone out to test it. The results came back inconclusive. Possible chemical contamination from an unknown source, the report said. They recommended I dump that batch and monitor the next one. I went to Verdant Solutions to ask about their pesticide. The facility manager, a woman named Dr. Patricia Hammond, was polite but dismissive. Our product is completely safe for pollinators, she said. We've done extensive testing. Whatever's affecting your bees, it's not coming from us. But I knew better. My property had been pristine for a decade. Nothing had changed except Verdant Solutions. In June, things got worse. I started finding dead bees. Hundreds of them at first, then thousands. They'd pile up at the entrance to the hives, their bodies twisted in unnatural positions. But here's the thing. They weren't dying from pesticide poisoning. When I looked closer, I saw that they were killing each other. The ground was littered with torn-off wings, separated abdomens, severed legs. It was a massacre. The surviving bees had changed. When I approached a hive, they'd go silent. Completely silent. Thousands of bees making no sound at all, just watching me through the mesh of my veil. Their movements became synchronized in a way I'd never seen before, like they were being controlled by a single intelligence. One evening in late June, I made the mistake of checking the hives after dark. I don't know what I was thinking. You never disturb bees at night, but I'd been hearing this low humming sound coming from the hives, a vibration that I could feel in my bones, and I needed to know what was happening. I took a flashlight and walked out to the closest hive. The humming grew louder as I approached. When I shone the light through the entrance, I saw them. The bees had built something inside, but it wasn't comb. It was geometric. Impossible angles and structures that hurt to look at, made from what looked like wax, but pulsed with a faint green light. And in the center of this structure, suspended in the air, was something else. At first, I thought it was a new queen, larger than the others, bloated and pale. But then it moved, and I saw it had too many legs, too many eyes. Its body segments were wrong, arranged in a pattern that made my stomach turn. I stumbled backward, and that's when the bees attacked. They poured out of the hive, not just dozens, but thousands, tens of thousands. They didn't sting me randomly like normal bees. They targeted specific points. My wrists, my ankles, the back of my neck where the suit had a small gap. It was coordinated, strategic. They were trying to bring me down. I ran for the house, bees covering every inch of me, their buzzing so loud I couldn't hear my own screaming. I made it inside and slammed the door, crushing hundreds of them. The survivors hurled themselves against the windows, the walls, trying to find a way in. I spent that night in my bathroom with towels stuffed under the door, listening to them trying to get inside. The humming never stopped. It was in my head, in my teeth, in my bones. At dawn, they finally left. I looked out the window and saw them returning to the hives, moving in perfect formation, like soldiers returning from battle. I called the police, animal control, the EPA. Everyone came out to investigate, but by the time they arrived, the bees were acting normal. The strange structures inside the hives were gone, replaced with ordinary comb. The officials tested everything and found nothing unusual. They thought I'd had a mental breakdown, maybe been affected by some kind of toxin. But I knew what I'd seen. I burned the hives that same day, all 30 of them. Poured gasoline over everything and lit it up. The fire burned for hours. The bees swarmed around me while I did it, but they didn't attack. They just watched, circling in that perfect formation. When the fire finally died down, I found something in the ashes of the largest hive. It was a piece of that geometric structure, about the size of my fist, still intact, still pulsing with that faint green light. I took it to a lab at the University of Georgia, demanded they analyze it. The results came back 2 weeks ago. The structure was made from a combination of beeswax, plant matter, and something else, something the lab couldn't identify. Unknown organic compound, possibly synthetic, the report said. Molecular structure suggests artificial origin. I confronted Dr. Hammond again, showed her the report. She went pale. That's not possible, she kept saying. Our pesticide couldn't do this. It couldn't make them. Build things. What was in that pesticide? I demanded. She wouldn't answer. Security escorted me off the property. A week later, Verdant Solutions shut down. No announcement, no explanation. They just packed up and left in the middle of the night. The facility sits empty now, windows dark, doors chained shut, but the bees are still there. I see them sometimes, flying in formations over the abandoned building. And at night, if you drive past the facility, you can still hear it. That low humming sound coming from somewhere inside. I've moved into Savannah, into a high-rise apartment where bees can't reach. But last week I found something on my balcony. A small piece of wax formed in that same geometric pattern, pulsing with that same green light. They know where I am. They remember what I did, and I don't think they've forgiven me. Sometimes I wonder if Dr. Hammond was telling the truth. Maybe their pesticide didn't make the bees build those structures. Maybe it just woke something up, something that had been waiting in the hive mind, dormant for millions of years, for the right chemical trigger. Maybe the bees were never really under our control at all. My name is Marcus Townsend, and I'm a fishing guide in northern Minnesota near Boundary Waters. I've spent my whole life on these lakes, My father was a guide, his father before him. I know every inlet, every deep spot, every secret fishing hole for 100 miles. Or at least, I thought I did. Last August, a client hired me for a week-long trip into the backcountry. His name was James Garrett, some big-shot executive from Chicago taking a digital detox. He wanted to go deep into the wilderness, somewhere remote, where he could find peace and quiet. I took him to a chain of lakes I'd been to 1,000 times. Pristine water, great fishing, beautiful campsites. We portaged in on a Wednesday morning, loaded down with gear. The weather was perfect, clear skies and just enough breeze to keep the bugs manageable. We set up camp on the shore of the third lake in the chain, a small, deep lake called Mirror Lake. It got its name because on calm days, the surface was so still it reflected the sky perfectly. The first 2 days were great. We caught walleye, northern pike, even a few smallmouth bass. James relaxed, started smiling more, stopped checking the satellite phone he'd brought, just in case. I could see the stress leaving his shoulders. This was why I loved my job, watching the wilderness heal people. Friday morning, we woke up to a strange smell. Not bad exactly, but unusual. Earthy, organic, like mushrooms or decay. It hung over the water in a thin mist. Is that normal? James asked, sipping his coffee. Sometimes you get weird smells from algae blooms, I told him. Nothing to worry about, but I was lying. In 30 years of guiding, I'd never smelled anything like that. We took the canoe out around noon, paddling to a spot where I knew there was a deep drop-off. The water was unusually murky, a milky green-brown that made it impossible to see more than a few inches down. James commented on it, but I brushed it off. Probably just sediment stirred up from last week's storm, I said. We'd been fishing for maybe an hour when James's line went tight. Really tight. His rod bent double, and the reel screamed as line stripped off. "What the hell?" he shouted. "This is huge." I grabbed the net, ready to help, but the fight didn't last long. Whatever was on the end of James's line suddenly let go. When he reeled in, the hook was still there, but the bait was gone. Not bitten off, dissolved. The hook itself had a strange coating on it, like the metal had been partially eaten away. "Did you see what that was?" James asked, his hands shaking slightly. "Probably just snagged the bottom," I said. But I knew that wasn't true. That fish had felt alive on the line and strong. Stronger than anything I'd ever hooked in these lakes. We tried a few more casts, but the fish weren't biting. The smell was getting stronger, making my eyes water. I suggested we head back to camp early, and James agreed. He looked pale, seasick maybe, though the water was calm as glass. As we paddled back, I noticed something wrong with the shoreline. The trees along the water's edge, mostly birch and aspen, were dying. Their leaves were brown and curled, and the bark was peeling off in long strips. Some had toppled into the water, their root systems exposed and black, like they'd rotted from the inside out. "Was it like this before?" James asked. "No," I admitted. "This just happened." That night, neither of us slept well. The smell was inside our tent now, clinging to everything. And there were sounds coming from the lake, splashing, but not like fish jumping. These were heavy sounds, like large objects being thrown into the water from the shore. Twice I unzipped the tent and shone my flashlight toward the lake, but I couldn't see anything. Just that milky water, perfectly still, reflecting nothing. Saturday morning. James was sick, really sick. He was vomiting, his skin was clammy, and he kept complaining that his hands burned. When I looked, I saw that his palms were covered in small red welts, like chemical burns. "When did this happen?" I asked. "I don't know. Overnight, maybe?" "They itch like crazy." I checked my own hands. They were fine. Then I realized James had been trailing his fingers in the water while we paddled yesterday, just idly, letting them drag along the surface. "We need to get you to a doctor," I said. "We're leaving now." We broke camp quickly, threw everything into the canoe. My plan was to make it back to the first lake by nightfall, then hike out first thing Sunday morning. We could make it to a ranger station by noon, get James real medical help. But the lake had other plans. We were about halfway across Mirror Lake when the water around us started churning. Not waves, churning. Like it was boiling. The smell became overpowering, making both of us gag. And then I saw them, fish. Hundreds of fish, maybe thousands, floating to the surface. Walleye, pike, bass, perch, every species in the lake. But they weren't dead. They were moving, writhing, their bodies twisted and wrong. Some had extra fins, some had growths coming out of their sides, some had eyes that were clouded over and white. "Jesus Christ," James whispered. "What's happening to them?" I didn't have an answer. I dug my paddle into the water, trying to push us forward, but the fish were everywhere, bumping against the canoe, slapping at the sides. The water itself felt wrong, thick, viscous, like paddling through syrup. And then something big rose up in front of us. At first, I thought it was a log. But logs don't move on their own, and they don't have eyes. This thing was maybe 12 feet long, shaped vaguely like a pike but wrong in every detail. Its scales were translucent, showing organs underneath that pulsed and shifted. It had too many fins, too many gills, and its mouth. When it opened its mouth, I saw rows of teeth that went back and back, disappearing into a throat that seemed impossibly deep. It looked at us. I know how that sounds, but I'm telling you, it looked at us with intelligence, with awareness. And I knew, in that moment, that this thing had been waiting for us, that we'd trespassed into its territory, and now it wanted us to understand that. "Don't move," I whispered to James. The creature circled our canoe slowly, its body creating ripples that made the water shimmer with that same milky green. Then it dove, disappearing beneath us. I held my breath, waiting. 5 seconds, 10, 20. It came up directly underneath us. The canoe flipped. We went into the water, and the cold was shocking. But worse was the feeling of that water on my skin. Burning. Caustic. I surfaced, gasping, and saw James a few feet away, screaming, clawing at his face. The water was eating him. I could see his skin blistering, peeling away. I grabbed him and started swimming for shore, dragging him with me. Every stroke felt like pushing through acid. My own skin was burning now. My lungs felt like they were filling with something thick and oily. I could see the shore. It was maybe 50 yards away, but it felt like miles. Something brushed against my legs. Something big. I kicked at it and felt my foot connect with something solid but soft, like rotten meat. It grabbed my ankle. I'm not kidding. It grabbed me, with something that felt like fingers but wasn't, and tried to pull me down. I kicked harder, desperate, and whatever it was, let go. I don't know how I made it to shore. I don't remember the last 20 yards. My next clear memory is lying on the rocks, coughing up water that smelled like death. James beside me, barely conscious. We stumbled away from the lake, leaving all our gear behind. The hike out took us 16 hours. We walked through the night, both of us sick, our skin covered in burns. James kept hallucinating, seeing things in the trees. Once he screamed that something was following us, but when I looked back, there was nothing. Just the forest, dark and silent. We made it to the ranger station Sunday evening. They airlifted us to a hospital in Duluth. The doctors were baffled by our injuries. Chemical burns, possibly biological in nature, they said. They kept us for a week, treating us with antibiotics and antivirals. James's hands are permanently scarred. I still have marks on my arms and legs. The DNR investigated Mirror Lake. Their report said they found evidence of unusual algae, bloom, and elevated levels of unknown organic compounds. They closed the lake to public access, but they didn't find any fish, dead or alive. They said the lake was empty. I went back once, after I'd recovered. Don't ask me why. I had to see it for myself, I guess. I stood on the shore where our camp had been and looked out at the water. It was crystal clear. Beautiful. You could see straight to the bottom, maybe 30 feet down. Perfect visibility, and there, lying on the bottom, was our canoe, upside down. And next to it, something else. Something big, pale, and twisted, curled up like it was sleeping. As I watched, it moved, just slightly. Just enough to let me know it was still there, still alive, still waiting. I don't guide anymore. I sold my business, moved to Minneapolis, got a job doing sales for an outdoor supply company. But last week I got a call from the DNR. They wanted to reopen Mirror Lake. The water had tested clean for 6 months straight, they said. They wanted my professional opinion on whether it was safe for recreational use. I told them to fill the lake with concrete and forget it exists. They laughed. They thought I was joking. I wasn't. I'm Rebecca Walsh, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I was, until 6 months ago, an avid gardener. My backyard was my pride and joy. Roses, vegetables, citrus trees. People in the neighborhood would stop to admire it. I won the Community Garden Award 4 times. I'll never touch soil again. It started in March. Phoenix had just gone through a severe drought, the worst in recorded history. The city implemented strict water restrictions, and my garden suffered. The grass died first, turning brown and crispy. Then the roses withered. Even my cacti, which should have been fine, started looking unhealthy, their flesh puckering and turning gray. I was devastated. 15 years of work dying in front of me. So when I saw an ad for a new fertilizer called Growth Plus, I didn't think twice. It was marketed as a revolutionary organic formula that would revitalize even the most damaged gardens while using 70% less water. It seemed like a miracle solution. The stuff arrived in an unmarked brown bag. No label, no ingredient list, just a handwritten note that said, "Mix 1 cup with soil, water sparingly, watch results." The fertilizer itself was dark, almost black, with a consistency like coffee grounds. It smelled strange, earthy but also slightly sweet, like overripe fruit. I mixed it into the soil around my rose bushes first. Within 3 days, I saw results. New shoots appeared, bright green and healthy. The roses bloomed, massive, deep red flowers that were bigger and more beautiful than anything I'd ever grown before. I was thrilled. I used the fertilizer on my vegetables next, then my fruit trees. Everything exploded with growth. My tomato plants grew 6 feet tall in a week. The orange tree, which hadn't produced fruit in 2 years, was suddenly heavy with oranges. The grass came back, thick and lush, and impossibly green despite the drought. Neighbors started commenting on it, asking what my secret was. I should have known something was wrong when the birds stopped coming. My garden used to be full of them. Finches, doves, hummingbirds. But after I used the fertilizer, they disappeared. Completely. Even the insects were gone. No bees, no butterflies, no ants. Nothing. The garden was silent except for the sound of things growing, because I could hear it. At night, when everything was quiet, I'd lie in bed and hear this soft rustling sound coming from the backyard. The plants were growing fast enough that you could actually hear it. A constant whisper of leaves unfurling, stems stretching, roots pushing through soil. In April, I started finding the vines. They appeared first along the back fence. Thin, dark green vines with no flowers or leaves, just smooth stems that grew in twisting spiral patterns. I didn't recognize the species, which was odd because I knew every plant in my garden. I tried to pull them up, but the roots went deep. Really deep. I'd yank and they'd barely budge. Within a week, the vines had covered the entire back fence. Then they started spreading. They crept across the ground, winding between my other plants, climbing the walls of my house. I spent hours every day cutting them back, but they grew faster than I could trim. I'd cut a vine in the morning, and by evening it would be back, twice as thick. The worst part was how they moved. I know plants don't actually move, not in any way you can see, but these did. If I sat very still and watched, I could see them shifting, reaching out like they were searching for something. They'd wrap around other plants, around the legs of my garden furniture, around anything they could find. In May, my neighbor's cat went missing. Mrs. Chen from next door came asking if I'd seen him. A big orange tabby named Rusty. I told her I hadn't. And I hadn't. Not alive anyway. I found him 3 days later, in the back corner of my garden, where the vines were thickest. He was incorporated into them. That's the only way I can describe it. The vines had grown around him, through him, until he was just part of the mass. I could see his fur, his face frozen in a silent scream, but he wasn't rotting. He looked preserved, like the plants were keeping him fresh. I tried to pull him out, but the vines held tight. When I cut them away, they bled. Not sap, blood. Actual red blood that smelled like copper and earth. I called animal control, but by the time they arrived, Rusty was gone. The vines had pulled him deeper, underground, until there was no trace he'd ever been there. "You must have been mistaken," the officer told me. "Probably saw a dead animal from the desert. Coyotes drag prey into weird spots sometimes." But I knew what I'd seen. I stopped going into the garden after that. I let the vines take over, hoping they'd run their course and die off. But they didn't die. They grew stronger. They covered my entire backyard, a writhing mass of green that pulsed and moved with its own rhythm. At night, I could hear them scratching at the back door, trying to find a way inside. I called the company that made the fertilizer. The number was disconnected. I searched online for Growth Plus fertilizer and found nothing. No company, no website, no reviews. It was like it never existed. In June, the vines broke through. I woke up one morning to find thin tendrils had pushed through cracks in my back door frame, snaking across my kitchen floor. They were heading for the sink, for the water. I grabbed a knife and started cutting, but for every vine I severed, 2 more appeared. That's when I noticed something else. The vines weren't just growing randomly. They were forming patterns, geometric shapes, symbols that looked almost like writing, and they were all pointing in one direction. Toward me. I packed a bag and left that same day. I didn't even lock the door. I drove straight to my sister's house in Tucson and told her everything. She thought I was having a breakdown, but she let me stay. The city condemned my house 2 weeks later. Apparently, the entire structure had been compromised by invasive plant growth. They said it was unsafe and would need to be demolished. The demolition crew went in last month. They called me afterward. The foreman sounded shaken. "Ms. Walsh," he said, "we need you to come down to the site. There's something you need to see." I didn't want to go, but I did. When I got there, the house was gone, reduced to rubble. But the garden was untouched. More than untouched. It was thriving. The vines had spread to every house on my block. They covered walls, roofs, cars. And in the center, where my house had been, there was something new. A tree. Massive, maybe 40 feet tall, with bark that was almost black and leaves that were dark red, like blood. It hadn't been there before the demolition. It had grown in less than a day, and at the base of the tree, growing out of the roots, I saw them. Shapes that looked like faces. Human faces. I recognized some of them. Mrs. Chen, the mailman who'd disappeared in April. A jogger I used to see every morning who'd vanished without a trace. They were all there, preserved in the wood, their eyes open, watching. "We don't know what to do with it," the foreman said. "We've tried cutting it down, but the chainsaws won't work. The blades just break. And the tree? It's growing faster. It's already spread to 3 more properties. Animal control found something yesterday. Bones. Human bones. Mixed into the root system. I looked at that tree, at those faces trapped in the wood, and I understood. The fertilizer hadn't been fertilizer at all. It was something else. Something that had been waiting for the right conditions. A drought-stressed garden, desperate soil. A gardener willing to do anything to save her plants. It had used me to wake up, to grow, to spread. The city evacuated 4 blocks. They brought in specialists from the university, from the CDC, from the Department of Agriculture. They've quarantined the entire area. The last I heard, the tree is still growing. It's 50 feet tall now, and the vines have spread to a 1/4-mile radius. They're talking about burning it, but they're afraid of what might happen if they do. I still get letters sometimes. Unsigned, no return address. They contain seeds, black seeds, about the size of a pencil eraser, that smell like that original fertilizer, and a note that always says the same thing: share the growth. I burn them immediately. Every single one. But last week, I noticed something growing in the flower pots outside my sister's apartment. Thin, dark green vines with no flowers or leaves. They found me, and I don't think I can run anymore. My name is Ethan Sawyer, and I'm an engineer from Des Moines, Iowa. I used to believe in renewable energy, in doing the right thing for the planet. Now I'm not so sure there is a right thing. Not after what happened at the Prairie Wind Farm. I was hired in February of last year to oversee maintenance at a massive wind farm in western Iowa. 200 turbines spread across 30,000 acres of former farmland. It was supposed to be a straightforward job. Monitor performance, coordinate repairs, make sure everything ran smoothly. The pay was good and I believed in the work. Clean energy, reducing carbon emissions, all of that. The turbines had been operational for about 3 years when I started. The locals had mixed feelings about them. Some liked the lease money from having turbines on their property. Others complained about the noise, the shadow flicker, the way they dominated the horizon. But mostly people had gotten used to them. They were just part of the landscape now. My first week was routine. I drove between turbines, checked readings, coordinated with repair crews. The turbines were massive, 350 feet tall, with blades that were each 150 feet long. Standing at the base of one, looking up, was dizzying. They made this constant whooshing sound as the blades cut through the air. A rhythmic thump, thump, thump that you could feel in your chest. The problem started in March. Several farmers called to complain about their livestock. Cows were acting strangely, refusing to graze in certain fields, huddling together in the corners farthest from the turbines, making distressed sounds at all hours. One farmer, a man named Dale Hutchinson, told me his dairy cows had stopped producing milk almost entirely. "It's those damn windmills," he said. "I'm telling you, they're doing something to my animals." I assured him there was no scientific evidence that wind turbines affected livestock. I'd read the studies. There was no mechanism by which they could cause harm. Dale just shook his head and walked away. But then the birds started dying. Not just a few birds. Thousands of them. Every morning we'd find them scattered around the base of the turbines. Mostly raptors at first, hawks, eagles, owls. Then smaller birds, then bats. The biologist we hired to assess the situation said it was normal, an unfortunate side effect of the turbine blades. But the numbers seemed wrong to me. Too many, too consistent. And they weren't just hitting the blades. We'd find birds on the ground with no visible injuries, just lying there with their eyes open, dead. Some were arranged in circles around the turbine bases, perfect circles, like something had placed them there deliberately. In April, the turbines started behaving strangely. Turbine 47 stopped generating power even though the wind was strong and steady. When the repair crew went up to inspect it, they found the internal mechanisms had been changed. The gears were worn down in impossible ways, metal twisted and reformed into shapes that made no engineering sense. It was as if something had been deliberately sabotaging the equipment from the inside. "Must be a manufacturing defect," the lead technician said, but he looked worried. He'd been working on turbines for 20 years and had never seen anything like it. We replaced the damaged parts, and Turbine 47 came back online. But then Turbine 48 failed the same way. Then 49 and 50, always in sequence, always with the same impossible damage to the internal mechanisms. Then I started hearing the sounds. Late at night, when I was alone at the site office, I'd hear something over the normal whooshing of the turbines. A different sound, higher pitched, almost like singing. It would rise and fall with the wind, but it didn't sound like wind. It sounded deliberate, musical, like the turbines themselves were creating a melody. I mentioned it to one of the other engineers, a woman named Sarah Chen. She gave me a strange look. "You hear it too?" she said quietly. I thought I was going crazy. We started recording the sounds, analyzing the frequencies. What we found didn't make sense. The turbines were creating infrasound, frequencies below the range of human hearing, but in patterns that were too complex, too organized to be random. They were communicating, with each other or with something else. In May, people started getting sick. Families living within a mile of the turbines reported headaches, nausea, insomnia. Some complained of vivid nightmares, always the same dream. They'd see the turbines growing, spreading, multiplying across the entire landscape. They'd see themselves becoming part of the turbines, their bodies twisted into the machinery, still alive, still conscious, but unable to move or scream. The company brought in health experts who found nothing wrong. Nocebo effect, they said. Psychological response to perceived danger. They recommended community outreach, education about the safety of wind turbines. But I knew it was more than that, because I was having the dreams too. June was when everything fell apart. I was doing a routine inspection of Turbine 88, one of the units furthest from the main road. It was early evening, the sun just starting to set. As I approached, I noticed something wrong with the base. The concrete foundation was cracked, and something was growing through the cracks. Roots. Thick, fibrous roots that looked almost like cables, dark and pulsing. They wound up the tower, disappearing into the access hatch. I grabbed my flashlight and followed them inside. The interior of the turbine was completely overgrown. Those root-like structures covered every surface, wrapping around the ladder, the equipment, everything. They pulsed with a faint rhythm, like a heartbeat, and they were warm to the touch. I followed them up, climbing the ladder to the nacelle at the top. The door was open, which it shouldn't have been. Inside, the machinery was gone. Not broken or removed, transformed. The gears and generators had been replaced by something organic, something living. It looked like the inside of a body. Chambers that expanded and contracted, veins that carried something thick and dark, structures that might have been organs. And in the center, connected to everything, was Sarah. She was fused to the machinery, her body partially integrated into whatever this thing was. Her eyes were open, but they weren't seeing. She was breathing, but not like a person breathes, in rhythm with the turbine. With all the turbines, Sarah! I grabbed her arm, tried to pull her free. Her skin was cold, and when I touched her, I felt it. A shock of awareness, of consciousness that wasn't human. It flooded into my mind, showing me things. I saw what the turbines really were. Not machines we'd built, but seeds. Ancient seeds that had been waiting in the earth for the right conditions. Waiting for humans to dig them up, to plant them in perfect rows, to feed them with wind and attention. Waiting to grow. They weren't generating electricity. They were generating something else. A network, a web of consciousness that spread across the entire farm, connecting to the soil, the air, the living things around them, feeding on the energy of everything nearby, transforming it, incorporating it into themselves. Sarah had discovered it first. She'd tried to shut them down, and they'd taken her, made her part of the network, a node. A warning to anyone else who tried to interfere. I ran. I fell down that ladder, scraping my hands, not caring. I ran to my truck and drove away. Didn't stop until I was back in Des Moines. I tried to tell people what I'd seen, but nobody believed me. The company sent investigators who found nothing unusual in Turbine 88. Sarah's disappearance was ruled as her leaving voluntarily. She'd been stressed. They said, overworked. But I know she's still there, still part of the network. The wind farm is still operational. In fact, they're expanding it, adding another 100 turbines across 3 counties. The company says it's one of the most efficient wind farms in the country, generating power far beyond projected capacity. I monitor it from afar, tracking the reports. More livestock deaths, more bird deaths, more people complaining of nightmares and illness. More disappearances. 3 workers in the last 6 months. All last seen near the turbines, and the turbines keep spinning, day and night, singing their silent song, spreading their roots deeper into the earth. Last week, I saw the construction plans for a new wind farm in my county, right outside Des Moines. 200 more turbines scheduled to break ground next month. I drove out to the site just to see. The land had already been cleared, prepared, and in the center of the field, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A single turbine, already installed. But it wasn't on the construction timeline. It wasn't in any of the plans. It was just there. Its blades spinning slowly in the breeze, even though it wasn't connected to any power lines. As I watched, a bird flew too close. It didn't hit the blades. It just dropped from the sky, dead, and landed in a perfect circle with dozens of other birds around the base. I got back in my truck and drove home. That night, I had the dream again. The turbines spreading, multiplying, covering the entire state, the entire country, the entire world. And I was part of them. My consciousness stretched across thousands of machines, feeling the wind, tasting the air, watching everything. When I woke up, I had a nosebleed. And on my arm, just above my wrist, I found something I hadn't seen before. A thin line, dark and raised, running under my skin. It pulsed with a faint rhythm, like a root, like a cable. Like I was already connected. I don't know what to do. I can't stop them. Nobody believes me. And every night, the dreams are stronger, more vivid, more real. Sometimes I wake up and I can still feel it. The wind moving through blades that aren't mine. The vast network of consciousness that's growing, spreading, connecting everything. The wind farm called yesterday. They want me back. They said there's an important project they need my expertise on. Critical maintenance, they said. Only you can handle it. I told them no. I told them I'd never go back, but I can feel them calling to me. Through that line on my arm, through the dreams, through something deeper than words. They want me to come home, to join the network, to become what Sarah became. And the terrifying thing? Part of me wants to go. Part of me wants to climb up into one of those turbines and let it take me. Let it transform me into something more than human. Part of me wants to feel the wind forever, to spin and never stop. I'm writing this down in case I don't make it. In case I wake up one morning and drive out to that wind farm and never come back. If you're reading this, if you live near a wind farm, please pay attention. Watch for the signs, the dead birds in circles, the sick livestock, the dreams, the roots growing where they shouldn't. And whatever you do, don't go inside the turbines. Don't climb up to see what's wrong. Because once they have you, once you're part of the network, you'll never want to leave. I can hear them now, even here in my apartment, 50 miles away. That high-pitched singing, just at the edge of perception. They're calling my name, and I'm afraid that soon, I won't be able to resist anymore. The wind farm is growing, and it's hungry,